Hello, geeks. This is Brian Quee from MedicalCodingGeek.com, and we are now in part 3 of the student interview with Norma. And so, in this part of the mentoring, interview session, we finally get into finishing the first question, and we get into answering questions about what got me into the role of auditing. And I share a very interesting story of how that happened. It has to do nothing with my interest in auditing. It's just a circumstantial event that just happened. I also answered the question, what is my greatest challenge in my current position? And then I also talk about some talents that are required in working as a clinical validation auditor. So that in itself takes another, 30 plus minutes. Remember that this is a nearly 3-hour session. So please stay tuned for the next videos. This should be the third one, so there should be 2 more. The next one should complete the interview, and the video following that should be a bonus video. It has nothing to do with her assignment, but she actually decided to ask more questions that were not on her assignment, and I stopped and took the time and answered those questions. So please follow through with the next set of videos. In the meantime, if you like the previous videos and if you like this video too, please consider subscribing so that way you get notified for the next videos. You don't want to miss it because I share some more insight on the revenue cycle process. I talk about more on networking and a lot more. So without further ado, here is part 3 of my interview with Norma. Enjoy.
You would think that because of issues like that they would learn to document a little bit better, wouldn't you think?
That's where CDI comes in. You know, the clinical documentation integrity team, because a hospital will have a coding team, they'll have a CDI team, and that's the responsibility of that. Now, this case was a case that was assigned to a CDI, but they didn't catch it. They did not ask, you see, like they didn't see it to ask the physician if the patient had it or still had it. You get it? So that's why like the coder and the CDI, they were in trouble. It wasn't my case, but
wow.
but like it was a case that was brought up in our meetings. Like, and that was my first.
When how did it get spotted then? If
they got to pay it back, the hospital had to pay back. I think it was a lot of money too, because the way that case was, if you took out that avascular necrosis from the codes, from the list of codes, it changed like the reimbursement, that relative weight that I'm talking about. There was such a drastic drop in severity. Like, okay, it went from like going from here to like all the way down here. And you're talking about thousands of dollars just from one condition.
So then all that money you're saying it was
the hospital
back,
had
right?
to pay back to the insurance company. And
so what happens on the hospital side? Do they argue and say, well, no, like, look, this is
that's the appeal side. Yep. That's the appeal side. Yeah. That's the appeal side. That's the appeals process that lengthens that time, you know?
Okay. And then that's somebody else's work, right?
Yeah,
that's another position, right?
It may be like a coding educator, a CDI educator. They're the ones who see that. They may be given the task of doing the appeal, you know, doing whatever the insurance company brings in as far as an appeal. And they handle all of that because it's not just one. I mean, they're getting, you know, if you're talking about, you know, hospitals have more, you know, they contract with more than one insurance, not just Medicare, not just Medicaid. You have third-party insurance. So imagine getting from every insurance that you're contracted with all of these denial letters. Hey, you're wrong. Prove me wrong. you know, every day,
Yeah.
you know, not just one, but just recurring and then on multiple insurances. So it's like, the hospital has to see something and has to do something, not just allow the process to happen. You see,
Right.
I'm going this way, right? The
Mhm.
hospital should go this way. They should start going the other direction. But it's so tough when they're doing like this, and then they're trying to go through the go anti-grade flow to go against the current because they don't have the
Mhm.
resources enough to do it. That's
Mm.
where that I'm just telling you where the dilemma is in the industry right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you see where like if I'm telling you where the dilemma is, that's probably where the solution is, and that's where we need the most people to go to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then also you might not want to work there either
It
if
may be
there's not enough people and you get stuck with them a lot of
exactly.
workload.
Yes. That's why I'm very selective. You gotta be very you got when you interview, you have to ask the
Ask
questions.
questions,
Yeah.
right?
Like what's the makeup? Am I the only one? Yes.
Yeah.
Bye. Don't bye-bye. Not me. Well, if it was me and I know I'm good, if I know I'm good, if I know the situation,
Yeah.
let's strike a deal. Let's strike a deal. If I'm the only one, okay. How are you gonna pay me if I'm the only one? Number two, you start negotiating. This is where business comes in, right? You just don't allow yourself to take the position. You have to take control of it, right? And so this is where people who are new in the field, they just say, okay, like my first mistake
Mhm.
was taking a position as a director of HIM position in a jail system. That was my
Yeah.
first director position for only 40,000. That equates to like $20 an hour, right? My first director position at $20 an hour, 40,000. You know what happened is that interview, I'm like, they would say, would you accept 40,000? Yeah.
Was that like, but how long ago was that?
I was like in 2005 or six. No, 2005, 2005.
Okay.
I was 25 back then. So I didn't know better,
Right.
but you only learn from your mistakes. So I
And
always
how
tell
long
that
were you
story.
there for?
A year.
A year only?
Yeah. Because after a year, they didn't even give me a raise. They I fixed all the problems that they had, and
Mhm.
I said, look, I fixed the problems. Let's bring in resources so that way
Mhm.
we can make this situation better or continue this good thing that I just fixed.
Yeah.
And they're like, we don't have the budget for that. And that's where
Wow.
CDI stepped in because I used to work for the organization that I worked as a CDI. They called me back and they say, hey, we noticed that you used to work for us. You have a degree, you have the RHIA. Would you mind being a CDI? Now it's easy. It was easier back then because it was such a early in the field, early in the
Mhm.
industry that CDI came about, like 2005. And
Mhm.
so I did, the interview that I did with my boss, she was the one that like gave me a chance because
Mhm.
I'm like, I don't want to do this coding thing. I told them up front. I was very upfront. No coding. No CDI. Like, dude, I don't want this. And so, like, we'll give you a chance. We'll train you. And so then I asked my
Nice.
question. I asked myself, like, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
12 years later, I'm in this role in this house, and you know, it's good. It's good. It's been a good
That's
process.
so good.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 2.
that was just the first question. Let's keep going. I'll work with you. Don't worry. Don't worry. Let's go.
What, who who would you consider to be the primary patients or individuals that you serve?
I think we answered that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, insurance
Um,
companies.
what made what made you enter this line of work?
Um,
That's a good question.
okay, interesting story, right? So, how did I enter being an auditor? I already told you about the CDI part. It was just out of the whim, right? How did I become an auditor? Is because we lived in South Florida,
Mhm.
Broward County. in Davie, right by the Miami Dolphins football camp. That's where we used to live. We're right down the street from them. And just to give you context, and we as a family used to go to Disney World a lot. A lot. Like we were Disney pass holders, right? And my wife loves Disney. She loves it. So we would go there, I don't know, like every other month. I mean, it was like a 3-hour drive. And then so she's like, we should move up here. I'm like, I don't want to move up here. And so long story short, we were looking for houses.
Mm-hmm.
And so we found this model house, right? This house that we're in. And she found, which is the house, which is like really down the street from us. It was just finished built. And she walked into the house. She's like, and then I don't know, when you walk upstairs and she went to the bedroom, she's like, like you could tell when your significant other really likes something. Like my wife makes this little squinty, she gets her eyes squinty, she's like, oh my god, like that type of face. And I'm like, and then I knew immediately, like, oh my gosh, I think we got to do it, happy wife, happy life, right? So and I think you're okay. I thought you were muted for a second. But then we had like, okay, we have to move. So like, when you're we've never moved like long distance. When you're talking about, it's like a 200-mile difference, the distance from where we live to where we live now. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Because the problem is that with CDI that I had my RHIA, right?
Mm-hmm.
They hired me with that. And I was 9 years into the position. And I said, I mean, I love the job that I'm working at, but I want to see something else. I want to see another hospital. And so I tried really hard, right? And this goes back to our initial conversation about the nursing, is that I tried, but what do they ask for? An RN. Every time. It just got very sickening to me, and to tell you the truth. And I would wow them into interviews. I would pass the tests. I would pass the second interviews. But then they're like, wait, you don't have an RN. I'm like, you're kidding me, man. You're kidding me, right? I did everything you want me to do, but you want me to have 2 extra letters in the back of my name? They're like, yeah. I'm like, oh. So it made me like, so aside from that, when we had to move, I'm like, well, what am I going to do if we move for a job? Like, this is a bigger house than what we had, that we used to live in a townhouse, right? And this is now a 5-bedroom house that she loved. I'm like, oh my, you see what I'm saying? I'm like, how are we going to afford this? And so I started looking frantically. Like in my mind, I'm like, okay, should I be a CDI? Like, CDI is all I do. That's all I've done for 12 years. But then no matter where I go, they close the door on me because I don't have an RN. And so I found that one of the things that I was very creative in my searches, right? So I did CDI. I started to think about, like, what did I do in my job that can translate into another job? It doesn't have to be CDI, but what is it that I do in CDI that can translate to another position? And one of the things that I looked for was DRG validation. It's like auditing, right? That I do now. But I thought I could do it for a hospital, like be an auditor for a hospital. I never thought about doing this for an insurance. So I do a search, DRG validation. And then I kept on looking. I looked at LinkedIn. I looked at Indeed was another one. But I think it was LinkedIn that did it. And so I found, right? And actually I found another company. Let me go back. I had a what do you call that? I had a college classmate, right? She was in the same path. She had her RHIA. She got hired by a company similar, right? and she got hired as a supervisor. I mean, she had no coding
Wow.
skills, and she came to me to help me with her coding skills because she was in a supervisory role. She's still in that role. And so
Wow.
I went to her and I asked her, I said, hey,
And
do you
that's
have
all she had experience, or no experience whatsoever?
what? Nothing. She was in health information management doing the medical records side.
Okay.
And she just found this company, and then she just got hired immediately to supervisor.
Wow.
And she came to me, she says, oh my God, I got hired as a supervisor, but I don't know enough coding to get by. Can you help me? And I helped
Yeah.
her, right? And so I did that in a way like, you're growing your network, that type of thing that I talked about in the beginning. And I went to her, I says, do you have any openings? She says, no, we don't have any openings. And so she finally got to me. She says, we have an opening. But let me tell you, when I went to the company, the HR process is so distanced from the actual applicant. What do I mean? It's like when you go to the company, right? You try to fill out the application. It's such a long drawn process on how to do this application. And so what would make me qualified to be a candidate for interview is putting in the right keywords.
Mhm.
So it became a game to try to get noticed in the application process. I'm like, that's not how it should be. It should be me with the person who's trying to hire me that I should be impressing, not the freaking software that they got to get me noticed. So I actually applied twice. They never contacted me, right? This company.
Mhm.
So I'm like, oh boy. So then again, similarities. Like, where can I find something similar to what I do? Because I really like what she does, right? I really like
Mhm.
the dark side, you know? So then I found, but when I read um job description, I was intimidated. The same way
Mhm.
I was intimidated by CDI, I felt I was
Yeah.
intimidated by this role. I'm like, oh, I don't, I don't, is this the same situation that they only want nurses? And so I said, let me just put it in. I put it in. I put into a couple DRG validation type of positions, like an auditor. So because after 12 years, that's what I feel like I can do for them, that I can offer a company. And so I finally get a message on LinkedIn by the name of Judy. Judy is the HR person. So I'm like, thank God that there is somebody out there who's willing to go connect with the applicant. Now, I'm not trying to, trying to play a freaking video game, try to get noticed on some type of HR platform. And so she reached
Right.
out to me, and I the same way I talked about my CDI, like, I don't know about this. I says, I don't have an RN. Is that okay? I wanted to get that, off my chest. And then she
Yeah.
says, no, we don't need RNs. We just need people who, I think your background is great. That's why I'm reaching out to you. She took the time to look at the applicant and validate it to the current role that they need. It so
Mm.
happened that they needed a lot of people. There was such a need for auditors in that
Right.
company, to the point
Okay.
where when they hired me eventually, the training class was so big. It was 20 people. Normally they bring in like 1 to 2 people to Texas or others for training. They brought in a big group of 20. That's how much they needed. So I came
Wow.
in at a point where they needed more people, because I think I've always said, go to a company that's in the process of growing,
Mm.
not when they're stagnant, because when they're stagnant, there's no opportunity. When they don't
So like
grow,
maybe like a small company that's kind of still.
yeah, like they're good, but they're not growing. When they're good and they're stable, they're not gonna hire people because they're settled where they're at. Now, if they're
Mhm.
growing, when they grow, they need more resources. When you need more
Right.
resources, you need more people. Well, this one needed a lot of resources. They were growing. They were definitely growing, and I'm like, okay. And so, and so, it was a remote position. So I'm like, okay, great. And so
So how did you feel about that?
about remote,
Yeah.
um, I did not know because I used to do remote work. I did remote work for my CDI position when I needed to. It was like
Oh,
a
you
PR.
did?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Whenever,
okay.
like for example, for holidays, they needed coverage, or if I was sick, I could do it from home, right? So I
Oh,
knew
okay.
how to do it. I knew how to do it, right? But it's a difference between doing it, PRN once in a while, but there's a difference between it day to day to day. So eventually I
Hmm.
got the position, right? Right. And so I went to a week training in McKinney, Texas. And then they're like, okay, we'll mail you everything. I had my laptop. So when I went to Texas, they gave me the laptop. I took it to me in Florida and said, we'll mail you some dual monitors. We'll email you a docking station, mouse, and keyboard. I'm like, okay,
Nice.
cool. And then you start and we'll train you from that point on. And so I'm like, okay, great. And I've said this in other podcasts, but I'll tell you, it's like it's an adjustment. It really is an adjustment to work from home because number one, I mean, I had my kids at home because we moved mid-year in the school year, so like we couldn't take them and put them into another school, so I had to put them on
Okay.
virtual school, right? I had to put them in what's called a Florida virtual school. And so they continued halfway. They left halfway in the year and they had to continue the other half in another school. And they had to do it at home. So that's another adjustment because we had to get them all. I have 3 kids. I had to get them all laptops, get them all internet connections. And then on top of that, I'm using the internet connection here. So it's
Yeah.
such a big adjustment. And then for myself, it's like I woke up, I went downstairs, I started work. When I finished work, I went to the kitchen, I cooked dinner, I went to bed. From bed down
Again.
here again, again, right? So it became like very monotonous. And so I think at some point I was really getting depressed, you know?
Really?
Yeah, I was getting depressed
So you
because
would have preferred to go to work, to go like to, yeah.
it's not the I don't think it's the driving. It's just meeting people.
Yeah, the
I'm a person. Yeah,
interaction.
I'm a very much a guy who needs to interact. I mean, it doesn't take much. I don't need a full conversation. I just need to
Yeah,
see
yeah.
people. It's like I'm in a
Yeah.
like eventually it felt like I was in a prison here.
Yeah.
Like okay, go work. Okay, go eat. Okay, go sleep.
And this was all before COVID, right?
Before COVID. Before COVID.
Wow.
I got it out of my system before COVID. This is
Yeah.
2018. And so the way I corrected it was um, I took the time that I spent commuting to work, which was about like, like a half hour. Like it was a good drive. It was like a half an hour. And I would go and drive like an hour to pick up my kids. So it's like, there's time, like an hour and a half per day. And so I said, I was like, okay, I was starting my day at 7 and finishing at 3:30. And by the time I was like, like I don't want to do anything, right? So I adjusted my schedule and I said, okay, I need to get out of the house because this is a prison because I'm not going nowhere and the traffic's
Yeah.
horrendous. I don't know the area. I don't know where to go. And also everything else, like where I were used to live, it was like a minute away. When we move here, everything's 10 miles away.
Oh
Like
man.
the nearest grocery store that I want to go that I used to have in South Florida, it's now 10 miles away. And on top of that, with traffic. So driving was like horrendous over here. And so
Oh.
that's where I decided, let's just get Amazon Prime. But again, that didn't solve the issue. It's like you're still here. So what I did
Yeah.
is like, okay, I need some me time before and after
Mhm.
work because that's what I did when I commuted to and I commuted back home. Is that the me time? Because you're in the car by yourself, you're playing the radio, whatever it may be. And so okay,
Yeah.
so that's where I started to go taking walks before and after. And so then it led to it's another story, but it led to me completing my first marathon. That's the medal right there.
Wow.
Where is it? Right over there. Yeah.
Congratulations.
So after COVID though, I didn't run, so I gained all the weight back. I have to go. I lost about like 40 pounds doing that, and so I'm like, I need
Wow.
to
You
get back to
trained and
do it.
everything?
I did that one, and then a month afterwards, I did another one. Yeah.
Wow.
So after that, I'm like, it takes a lot of work, but it got me out of the house.
Yes.
It prepared me for the day. It got me to
And it
meditate.
helped you out mentally, right?
Yes, it helped me clear my mind. So I
Yes.
think I wasn't preparing myself. Whenever I do
That's
anything like
good.
work, you have to mentally prepare. Like, okay, at least give me an hour.
Yeah.
to get everything running. Because if I wake up and there's a start, like you're just shocked into that system. And so that's how I figured the remote part out. Also, this happened to my kids too. I said, let's just go out, take a walk, get away from your room,
Yeah.
get out of, because they had their computers in their room. This is not my room. This is my
Mhm.
office. So could you imagine my kids, like they're stuck in their room the whole day? And I'm like, we got to solve this. We got to fix this. So when COVID hit, everybody's like, on social media panicking. Oh, we're remote. And me and my kids were like, been there,
Already
done
used
that.
to it.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
used to it. It's not a problem to us. So that's how we solved that, and we've been pretty good. So now, like my kids now, my youngest is still continuing virtual school because we're still waiting for her high school to be built. That's how
Oh.
really undeveloped the area is. That the population is not. The population is over than what the county can provide in terms of education. So we had to go put them in virtual school, about virtual
Oh.
school. So now my kids are going. My two older ones are in high school. So we had them. So when COVID hit, we started to put them into an actual school because we found one.
Mhm.
But then when they started, they had to be digital. So it
Okay.
was like to them, it's like, come on, man, for real. We finally get to a school. Now we have to be
Yeah.
digital for the school. So now they're finally getting into, going back to school. Uh, Unfortunate, it was my daughter's this year is her senior year. So it's like she missed a lot, what she did
Yes.
in high school. She missed a lot of it.
Yeah.
And so now she's finally getting back to, a physical school her final year. So I keep on telling her, I said, high school is great, but then wait till you get to college.
Yeah.
That's another avenue. I mean,
Experience.
yeah, that's another experience that you will fully enjoy once you graduate. And then my son, he's in 11th grade, and then he started playing football. So uh, the adjustment's real as long as you realize, that what you need to do. And as if you get into a rut, you need to get out of that rut. I was really depressed.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Like I really wanted to find a job that was on site. I still miss it, but I actually
Mhm.
like this because it's very
Yeah.
flexible, very flexible. Like I can, take a 2 hour break if I needed to, and then come back and finish it. There's no like 8 to 4, 9 to 5 set schedule. You start and stop whenever you want. And then there's overtime like you won't believe.
Really.
Yeah. And you could do
Wow.
it on your own time.
That's the kind of job I want.
Yeah. It takes time, but you may find it early on. I mean, I'm not saying that you have to wait for it, but you just got to really look for it. Like, so
Yeah.
it'll come. But like I said, when you don't look for it,
That's
it'll
when they start.
that's when it comes to you. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. How would you describe the greatest challenges in your job? Or what
Okay.
would be like one of the biggest challenges that you face like on a daily basis?
Well, we already talked about the initial part, right? So the adjustment to
Mhm.
remote, because when they hired me or when they interviewed me, they kept on asking me questions about that. Like, are you able to work remote? And I didn't think about why they asked that question,
Yeah.
but until I got into it. Like I didn't realize the monotony of remote work may deter you from working for that company because that's all you do is just remote work, remote work, remote work. It may be the same thing. You may have limited contact with people. Like there are times where like days I don't speak to nobody. And so we have set up a system like Teams, right? And we put everybody in our team into a chat, a chat
Mhm.
room, and whatever questions we have, we start communicating with each other. So that is our extent of interpersonal
Dialogue. Yeah.
interpersonal contact with people, and
Yeah.
that was one of the big challenges, at least for that. Now, for me, one of my biggest challenges is taking what you have learned and then taking what your company is all about and
Applying
adjusting.
it.
Yeah, no, not applying it, but adjusting to what they need for you as an
Okay.
auditor. And so one of the biggest things that had challenged me is the because when I used to work at the hospital, it's like
Mm-hmm.
this is the type of cases, and it was very big. The
Mm-hmm.
type of repertoire of cases that I had. When I got to
It
it
expanded.
expanded a lot, and what's nice about it is that they have a library, a library of policies. Like you go into a file, and there's like so many files on so many conditions and so many coding guidelines that have opportunities for denials because it's based upon what they did previously. And so they would create a file for that. So initially, in the beginning, it was me trying to figure out and understand how to navigate those policies, and then reviewing the medical record, and then
Mm-hmm.
and then finally figuring out, like, oh, there's the opportunity. Where could I find the policy? And then apply to the medical record, and then make the letter. So it's like, to me, whenever I transition
And
to
was that time consuming?
yeah, it was more like what I did as a CDI was like this, right? And so imagine when you're in an old job, you're like this, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're into a new job, you're like,
Yeah.
but your mind is like, I want to take the next step, but
Yes.
you're like, you're doing it like this, right? So that's how I felt. And like for example, I just did the full marathon, right? And now I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to train again, but what your body is, what your mind is capable of, but your body is not compensating for what's in your head. It's the same
Yeah.
thing when I transition to the new position. It's like oh, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
so it's like retraining your systems. And so I think one of the biggest challenges is trying to get myself up to speed,
Mm-hmm.
right? And what's funny is that I have a colleague who I brought into the company. He's in the same boat, and I tell him, look, calm down, just get to know the process, get to know the policies. What's nice about the company is that they're not requiring you any productivity standard yet. So
Oh,
I told
good.
them, milk the time, take the
Yeah.
time to understand the policies. You will develop your own system, personal system. Like, okay, I need to click here. I need to click here. I need to access that.
Mm-hmm.
I need to review this. I know. So like you in your process of learning and training, you will develop your own protocol. And so once you have
Right.
your protocol set in a row, then all of a sudden, like, boom, 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 instead of like boom, boom. Where's that process? Oh, it's over here.
Yeah.
Like you have all your ducks in a row and you're just going boom, next, boom, next.
Yeah.
That's how it
Is that
works.
how you feel now, or do you feel like you still kind of get those moments
I
where you feel
I think after, I mean, to tell you the truth, after 2 years, I finally have my ducks in a row.
okay?
But there are times where there are, like say, for example, these policies, they don't stay stagnant. They are always constantly updating.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with medical coding guidelines. They always update every year. So like
Mm-hmm.
whenever you have your ducks in a row by the year, whatever the fiscal year or the end of that year, and new changes come, your ducks are all over the place. So you spend time in the beginning of the year going like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's put a thing back, and then boom, boom, and then another year hits, everything's scattered. So this is the me every year. Scatter, put everything together. Scatter, put everything together. Because that's
I guess
what
in a way that's kind of good though, no? Because it really gets your mind thinking
yeah, no,
and
yeah,
just
you
like,
can't be stagnant. You have to be
yeah,
um the word I use, you have to anticipate.
right.
You have to anticipate changes. Because if you know it doesn't seem right now, you know that a change would be coming by the governing bodies, that make these coding changes, that make these clinical changes. So you have
Mm-hmm.
to anticipate. For me, it's a bit of anticipation. And what I did as a side thing is I take these anticipations and I let people know about it. That's why I created those YouTube videos. Whenever I see something that like for example, the nursing thing, the HIM thing, whatever stuff that I feel like I need to talk about because people need to know about it, or it's something that they should anticipate,
Mm-hmm.
then I feel obliged to kind of like share this with some audience, because like yourself, you didn't know about people out there in the field unless I started doing stupid TikTok videos. that catches people's attention. They're like, oh, there's a person who does it that kind of makes it fun. That seems interesting. Let me connect with that person. That's hilarious. But yeah, that's the biggest changes is building. Biggest challenges is just handling change management. That's all it is. That's all it is, especially with medical coding. Even in HIM, when you're looking at regulations, somebody told me about this thing called the Cures Act that has to deal with information blocking, patient information blocking. These are things like, I'm like, where did that come from? Because all I knew was HIPAA, right? And so now, you got all of these HIM and release of information, people scrambling to understand what this Cures Act that was implemented, I think this year, that needs to be finally implemented like to the fullest extent by 2023. So like people are scrambling to make these certain changes, get their ducks in a row so that they raise everything straight. But for them, having their ducks in a row means being compliant. So that way they don't get fined for being out of compliance.
Right.
Yeah.
MedicalCodingGeek.com